The emergency sirens of war. 7 howled through the smog-drenched scrapyard, an unholy screech that rattled the bolts in Reese Carter's skull. He muttered a curse and slammed his fist against the control panel, watching a flickering red alert spread across the station's decaying holoscreens. Another ship, barely held together, limped into the docking bay, its hull scarred by what looked like pulse fire. Reese had seen plenty of wrecks crawl into Vor 7, but this one reeked of something worse than bad luck. The freighter had no transponder signal, no visible insignia, just damage and silence. Still, it wasn't his business. He was a mechanic, not a lawman, and he had one rule: fix what's broken, no questions asked. His exosuit hissed as he adjusted his grip on the plasma torch and made his way across the rusted catwalks, his boots clanking against the metal. Steam curled up from the grates, a mixture of oil, coolant, and God knew what else, creating the station's perpetual stink. When he reached the freighter's hull, he pressed a gloved hand against it, still warm. Whatever this ship had been running from, it hadn't gotten far enough. The docking clamps engaged with a groan. As the airlock cycled open, Reese caught movement from the corner of his eye, something small and rapid, darting into the shadows of the cargo bay. His spine stiffened. Vor 7 wasn't a place for surprises. His hand hovered over the sidearm, strapped to his belt. He stepped inside. The ship was a mess of blown wiring, shattered panels, and the acrid stench of burnt electronics. Blood smeared the walls in hurried streaks, as if someone had been dragged. Reese exhaled sharply, his breath fogging against his visor. Someone had died here. More than one, judging by the slumped, desiccated remains of a crew member still strapped into a chair, throat slashed deep enough to expose vertebrae. He should have turned back, reported it to the station overseer, let the scavengers pick the bones clean. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the uneasy stillness, the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then he heard it, a low, pain growl. Reese turned sharply, following the sound deeper into the cargo bay. A single crate sat among the debris, its surface scorched, half-melted but still intact. The noise came from inside. He knelt, fingers brushing across the crate's identification tag. The letters were mostly burned away, but one word remained visible, etched deep into the metal. Disposal. The growling grew softer, turning into something else, a whimper. Faint, ragged breathing. Reese's stomach tightened. He grabbed his plasma torch and carved through the locking mechanism, the metal hissing as it melted apart. With a final heave, he pried the lid open. Inside, curled against the corner of the crate, was a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen. It looked canine at first glance, sleek, black fur matted with blood, limbs corded with dense muscle. But its eyes, burning a molten gold, were wrong. Too intelligent, too calculating. Around its throat was a thick, metallic collar, bolted into its flesh with cruel efficiency. The scars surrounding it suggested it had been there for a long time. And curled beneath the beast's mangled forelimb was something smaller. A hatchling. Not the same species. No, this thing had delicate, translucent scales, a body shaped more like a reptilian humanoid than anything mammalian. It was barely breathing, its tiny talons gripping the larger creature's fur with what little strength it had left. Reese swallowed hard. Someone had locked them in here and sent them to die. His gut told him to walk away. This wasn't his problem. Vor 7 wasn't a place where people did favors for free, and taking in 2 unknown creatures, one of them a war beast, if he was guessing right, was a fast track to making powerful enemies. But as he reached forward, the canine's lips peeled back in a silent snarl, its body tensing despite the obvious pain it was in. The hatchling, too weak to do more than twitch, let out a tiny, pitiful chirp. Reese exhaled through his nose. "Damn it," he muttered. Slowly, he reached for his knife. Not to attack, to cut the chains. The creature's golden eyes tracked his every movement, but it didn't stop him as he wedged the blade beneath one of the metallic restraints. With a few precise tugs, the bolt snapped free, and the collar fell away, clattering against the crate's floor. The beast's entire body shuddered, like a prisoner tasting fresh air for the first time in years. It blinked at him, confused, wary. Reese wiped sweat from his brow and sheathed his knife. "You gonna kill me now?" he asked dryly. The creature didn't answer. Instead, it did something he didn't expect. It nudged the hatchling toward him. Reese's breath caught. The motion was unmistakable. A gesture of trust. A silent plea. Something twisted in his chest. Carefully, he lifted the hatchling into his arms. It was warm, too warm. Feverish. Malnourished. It barely had the strength to open its slitted eyes. The canine, still weak, staggered to its feet and limped beside him, never taking its gaze off the hatchling. It wasn't just a guard dog. It was a protector, maybe even a mother, and someone had wanted them dead. The station's sirens howled again, this time accompanied by a voice over the intercom. Unidentified vessel detected. Security forces en route for cargo retrieval. Reese tensed. His eyes flicked toward the docking bay's entrance, where distant figures, armed figures, were beginning to move. This wasn't a random derelict. Someone had been tracking this ship. Someone who wanted its cargo erased. He tightened his grip on the hatchling. He had two choices: leave them and pretend he never saw anything, or take them and run. The golden-eyed beast locked gazes with him, waiting. Reese made his decision. "Let's go," he muttered, hauling the hatchling close as he bolted toward his workshop, the creature limping at his side. Behind them, the station's security lockdown began. Reese Carter shoved the workshop door shut with his shoulder, locking it just as the overhead lights flickered in response to the station's security protocols. The whole of Vor 7 was groaning to life, a rusted beast waking from its slumber, and it was waking for them. He set the hatchling down carefully on a workbench cluttered with rusted tools, scavenged circuit boards, and half-finished repairs. The tiny creature barely stirred, its translucent scales slick with sweat, breathing shallow. It wouldn't last long without medical attention, but Vor 7 wasn't exactly known for its healthcare facilities. The other one, the war beast, stood at the edge of the room, muscles tensed, ears flicking at every sound beyond the door. Reese could see her processing everything, weighing the risks, waiting for the moment she'd have to fight. Her golden eyes landed on him. "I don't suppose you understand common?" Reese asked, grabbing a rag to wipe the sweat off his forehead. The beast didn't answer, just watched. "Didn't think so." He sighed and turned his attention to her wounds. Deep lacerations scored her flanks, old scars layered beneath fresh bruises. Whoever had owned her before had treated her like property, no worse. Like a weapon. He moved cautiously, testing her limits. The second his hand reached toward her, she let out a low, warning growl, not aggressive, but enough to say, "I am not broken yet." "Easy," Reese murmured. "I'm not here to hurt you." It was a stupid thing to say to something engineered for war, but still, after a long pause, the growl faded. She let him get close enough to see the metal embedded in her flesh, restraints, reinforced with locking mechanisms, that weren't meant to come off. The hatchling stirred. The moment it let out the smallest, friliest chirp, the war beast turned sharply, her ears snapping toward it. She moved fast, almost collapsing in her rush to reach the workbench, but Reese caught her before she could fall. Whoa, easy," he grunted, bracing her weight. She tolerated the touch this time. Her gaze locked onto the hatchling's small form, nose nudging at its body, her breath slow and steady as she pressed close, ensuring it was still alive. Reese had never seen a war beast behave like this. These creatures were supposed to be merciless, trained killers, their instincts wired for battle. But the way she curled around the hatchling, the way her body relaxed when she confirmed it was still breathing. This wasn't just instinct. It was something deeper. A sudden bang outside made Reese spin toward the door, heart hammering. Voices, muffled at first, but growing louder. "Security sweep. The cargo's missing. Check every hangar, every workshop." Reese's gut twisted. They were out of time. He moved fast, grabbing his scanner and shoving a cable into the war beast collar, trying to override the restraints. The moment the link connected, lines of encrypted code flooded the screen, twisting in unreadable, high-clearance military script. His jaw clenched. Whoever had made this collar hadn't wanted it removed. The beast shifted uncomfortably, but didn't stop him. The hatchling made another small sound, too weak to cry, barely strong enough to move. Its little chest shuddered with each breath. "Come on," Reese muttered under his breath, fingers flying over the interface. The locks were coded, but not unbreakable. The encryption was sophisticated, but Reese had torn through military-grade security before. This was just another machine, another broken thing that needed fixing. Outside, footsteps drew closer. Then, click! The collar hissed, the locks disengaging. The metal band split apart and fell to the floor with a heavy clang. The war beast stiffened. Her breath hitched, eyes widening as though she hadn't actually believed it could come off. She reached up slowly, claws brushing her own neck. For the first time in what was probably years, she was free. Reese exhaled sharply. "That feel better?" She turned her golden gaze to him again, and this time, he swore there was something different in it. Gratitude. Outside, the voices stopped right outside the door. A metallic beep. A scanner initializing. ***. Reese's blood ran cold. They were about to breach. He acted fast, scooping the hatchling into the folds of his jacket before lunging toward the maintenance hatch at the back of his workshop. It was small, barely wide enough for a person, leading into the labyrinthine ventilation shafts that wound through Vorse 7's decaying underbelly. "Go!" he hissed, jerking his head toward the passage. The war beast hesitated, just for a second, before following. She squeezed into the tunnel behind him just as the workshop door blew inward, a concussive charge sending metal and sparks flying. Shouts, boots stomping across the floor. Reese grit his teeth and kept moving. The tunnel was narrow, the air thick with the scent of burning dust and ozone. His heart pounded as he crawled through the shaft, careful not to jostle the fragile hatchling too much. He heard the war beast behind him, her breathing labored but steady. No sound of pursuit yet, but that wouldn't last. Vorse 7 security systems would already be running thermal scans. They had minutes before this whole place locked down. The tunnel split at the end, a drop down into the lower maintenance bay, where the emergency shuttles were stored. The escape pods were useless, long since gutted by scavengers, but Reese knew one thing still worked: his personal star cruiser. A rusted, barely functional piece of junk, but it could fly. Reese landed hard as he dropped down, pain rattling through his knees, but he forced himself up. He turned, extending a hand toward the war beast as she prepared to jump. For a moment, she hesitated. That unspoken trust between them flickered. Then she leapt. Reese caught her arm, steadied her as she landed, and together they turned toward the hangar doors. Beyond them, the station alarms were screaming, the security forces searching every bay. They were out of time. Reese let out a breath, adjusting his grip on the hatchling. They had one chance. Let's get the hell out of here. The hangar bay stretched before them, a cavernous expanse of metal and decay, bathed in the flickering glow of malfunctioning overhead lights. Reese could already hear the rhythmic stomp of boots in the corridors above, the heavy thud of reinforced plating against steel. The station's security forces were closing in fast. He barely spared a glance at his ship, a patched-together Vel 77 star cruiser, a ship so ugly, rusted, and temperamental that no sane bounty hunter would bother stealing it. But right now, it was their only way out. Nix, because he had to call her something, and War Beast didn't sit right anymore. Asterisk, sniffed the air, asterisk, her ears flicking toward the distant hum of a power relay cycling down. She could sense it too, the impending confrontation. The hatchling stirred weakly inside Reese's jacket, its small body fevered against his chest. They were running out of time. He took off at a sprint, boots slamming against the grated floor as he crossed the bay toward the ship's open ramp. Nix followed, keeping pace despite the lingering damage to her body. Every movement was precise, calculated, a predator aware of her limits, but unwilling to yield to them. Then the hangar doors slammed open. 6 men, armed. Reese barely had time to register the metallic blue plating of their armor before they opened fire. He hit the ground, rolling behind a crate as plasma bolts sizzled through the air, scorching the metal where he'd stood seconds before. Sparks rained down, the acrid scent of burnt ozone stinging his nostrils. Nyx didn't hesitate. She lunged with terrifying speed, her claws ripping across the nearest soldier's chest, slicing through armor like wet paper. The man collapsed with a gurgled scream, blood pooling beneath him as his squadmates cursed and recalibrated their aim. Reese popped up from cover, snapping off 2 precise shots from his sidearm. One found its mark, drilling through a soldier's visor. The other went wide. Asterisk, kill the mechanic. Capture the asset. Asterisk. One of the remaining mercenaries barked, adjusting his rifle's setting. Reese's stomach dropped. They weren't after him. They wanted Nyx and the hatchling. One of the soldiers tossed a shock grenade. Reese barely managed to shove Nyx aside before it detonated, a concussive wave of energy rolling through the hangar, static crawling over his skin. His ears rang. His vision blurred at the edges. Nyx shook off the effects first. Before the soldiers could regroup, she lunged again, her body twisting mid-air to avoid a hail of plasma rounds. She landed on one of them, claws tearing through his rifle, shredding the weapon in half before she bit down on his throat. Reese didn't waste the opening. He sprinted for the ship, leaping up the ramp and slamming his fist against the console. The engines whined in protest, coughing black smoke, but after a sputtering second, the power grid flickered to life. Nyx disengaged from the fight, her sleek black form blurring as she dodged another burst of gunfire, vaulting up the ramp just as Reese hit the emergency seal. The last thing he saw before the hatch closed was one of the soldiers activating a wrist comm. They weren't retreating. They were calling for reinforcements. The ship shuddered as Reese yanked the controls, forcing the decrepit engines to comply. The thrusters sputtered, then roared to life, sending the cruiser into a near-vertical climb. The view outside the cockpit blurred as Vor 7's interior rushed past, the outer hull approaching fast. Then the alarm screamed. Asterisk, inbound lock detected. Asterisk. Missile. Reese's grip tightened on the controls. He yanked the ship hard left, the inertial dampeners straining under the maneuver. Metal groaned, but the vessel responded. The explosion bloomed just outside the viewport, shock waves rocking the hull. Too close. Nyx crouched beside him, her breathing ragged, her golden eyes reflecting the flashing emergency lights. Hold on, Reese snarled, slamming the throttle forward. The cruiser punched through the station's exterior shield, the sudden shift from artificial gravity to open space making his stomach lurch. The vast emptiness of the void stretched out before them, stars burning cold and indifferent. But they weren't safe yet. Another warning klaxon blared. 3 ships, asterisk fast, sleek interceptors asterisk, were already closing the distance. Of course they had backup, Reese muttered, flicking a series of switches to reroute power to the aft shields. His ship wasn't built for combat. Hell, it wasn't even built for speed. If they engaged in a dogfight, they were dead. Nyx growled low, watching the ships with intense focus, as if she could feel the trap closing in. Reese's mind raced. His ship couldn't outrun them. It couldn't outgun them, which meant they had to be smarter. His fingers flew across the console, pulling up the navigation charts. There, a nearby asteroid field. Dense, unstable, perfect for losing pursuit. Hang on, he gritted out, yanking the controls and sending the ship into a steep dive. The G-forces crushed against him, but he fought through it, steering them straight into the swirling mass of jagged rock and debris. The interceptors followed, their weapons flaring in the dark. Reese barely dodged the first barrage, twisting between 2 tumbling asteroids, their surfaces grazing the ship's hull. Sparks erupted from the control panel. Shields are shot, he muttered. One more hit, and we're... The ship lurched violently, an explosion tearing across its starboard side. Reese swore, fighting the controls. I noticed the interceptors were still closing. They wouldn't make it. Not like this. Nyx suddenly moved, her claws tapping rapidly against the console. Reese barely had time to register what she was doing before she activated the external cargo release. The remaining scrap metal in the cargo bay detached, hurling into space behind them, right into the path of the pursuing ships. The first interceptor clipped a tumbling chunk of debris, its shields flickering before the impact sent it spinning out of control. The second pilot tried to veer away. Too late. A jagged asteroid tore through its hull, sending it into an uncontrolled spiral before it vanished in a fireball. The third ship pulled away at the last second, barely escaping the same fate, but it had fallen behind. And that was all Reese needed. He punched the engines one last time, pushing the cruiser past its limits. The stars stretched as they broke free from the asteroid field, leaving the remaining interceptor far behind. Only when the warning sirens faded did Reese let out a breath. They had escaped. His hands trembled as he disengaged the flight controls. His whole body ached, adrenaline still surging through his veins. Nyx exhaled slowly, slumping against the wall, her own exhaustion finally showing. Reese let his head fall back against the pilot's chair. Then he laughed. Asterisk, asterisk short, breathless, disbelieving asterisk, asterisk. That was insane, he muttered. Absolutely insane. Nyx just looked at him, and for the first time, Reese swore her expression almost resembled a smirk. Silence settled over the cockpit, the kind that only came after surviving something impossible. Reese sat motionless in his chair, staring at the flickering NAV console, heart still hammering like a faulty piston. The ship rattled, warning lights flashing across the display, but for the first time in what felt like hours, they weren't being shot at. They had escaped. The realization hit all at once, like a delayed impact after a hard landing. Reese dragged a shaky hand down his face, exhaling through clenched teeth. His ship was barely holding together, running on fumes, but they were alive. Behind him, Nyx stirred, her golden eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights. She was still battered, her wounds hastily patched, but she held herself with the same controlled strength as always. Even now, even after everything, she refused to show weakness. The hatchling nestled inside Reese's jacket let out a small, exhausted chirp. Right? Survival wasn't enough. Not yet. Reese turned back to the console, fingers flying over the interface as he scanned the surrounding systems. Vor 7 was far behind them now, nothing but a distant, rotting husk drifting in the void. But that didn't mean they were safe. A bounty that big didn't just disappear. Someone would come looking. Nearest station's 3 days out, he muttered, more to himself than anyone. We don't have the fuel for that. Which means, he let out a slow breath. We need a place to lay low. Nyx tilted her head slightly, watching him with sharp curiosity. Reese pulled up a sector map, filtering through old smuggler routes, uncharted moon outposts, anywhere that wasn't on a corporate radar. Then there, Calidus 9, he murmured, abandoned mining colony. Atmospheres breathable, underground structures still intact. He glanced at Nyx. Not exactly a luxury stop, but will be hard to find. Nyx didn't respond, but she didn't disagree either. Reese locked in the course, coaxing the battered ship into a slow trajectory toward the system's outer rim. The autopilot engaged with a reluctant groan, and for the first time since this whole mess started, he allowed himself to breathe. Then he turned back to Nyx. You're free now. The words felt strange to say. Heavy. I don't know what happens next for you, but you don't owe me anything. Nyx blinked slowly. Then, to Reese's surprise, she stepped forward, closing the space between them in a single, fluid motion. For a second, his pulse spiked. He'd seen her tear through trained soldiers with the efficiency of a weapon designed for war. He'd seen her endure pain without flinching, rip through obstacles like they were made of paper. He knew what she was capable of, but she didn't attack. Instead, she reached up with a careful, deliberate slowness, asterisk, asterisk, and pressed her forehead against his asterisk, asterisk. A gesture not of dominance, not of challenge, but recognition. Reese didn't move, barely breathed. The warmth of her touch, the quiet weight of it, said more than words ever could. Then she pulled back, tilting her head toward the hatchling. Reese exhaled. Yeah, I get it. This wasn't just about escape. It never had been. He moved carefully, cradling the hatchling as he set it down between them. It was still so small, its fragile body curled against the fabric of his jacket, its breath light and uneven. It had been abandoned just like Nyx, left for dead just like her. She curled protectively around it, her massive frame folding with surprising gentleness. Her golden eyes met Reese's, something unspoken passing between them. Reese leaned back against the pilot's chair, running a hand through his hair. Guess that makes us a crew then. Nyx let out a soft huff, something close to amusement. Reese smirked. Didn't see that coming either. The ship drifted through the void, engines humming softly as they carried toward an uncertain future. The war beast who was never meant to be free. The hatchling that shouldn't have survived. The mechanic who never thought he'd care about either. A broken crew, maybe, but a crew nonetheless.